the Weekly Show with David J. Maloney.
This week, David chats with director Michelle Danner.
And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to The Weekly Show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight's show, we've got a fantastic guest whose career in the film industry spans decades and involves some of the most well-known names in Hollywood. Here to chat about her incredible life and work, both as an acting coach and director, is none other than Michelle Danner. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Our featured guest tonight has had an incredible career in the film industry, and her story involves so many colorful characters and some of the most well-known actors of our time. She studied acting under the great Stella Adler and has herself been an in-demand acting coach for some of Hollywood's best and brightest. She has now turned her attention to more directorial work with her most recent film, Miranda's Victim, starring Abigail Breslin, Donald Sutherland, and Luke Wilson, receiving rave reviews from audiences, critics, and across the festival circuit. Here to chat about it all is none other than the great Michelle Danner. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Michelle, it seems like there's just so much to talk about with your life and show business, but I'd like to start at the beginning. If I'm not mistaken, you are truly a child of many cultures. What was life like for you growing up?
Well, I have felt that I had a very artistic childhood. My father opened the very first offices of the William Morris Agency, which is now William Morris Endeavor, in the 60s in Paris. And I was a little girl and I would go with him to work. I was very, very close to my dad. And I would play under his desk and play in his office while all these big stars would come in and talk about their careers, talk about their dreams. And I was very early on drawn to literature. So I would read quite a lot. As a matter of fact, in my closet, I created a whole reading, place. And I would go to museums and I would go to the theater and I would go to see films. And I was just passionate at a very early age about storytelling, great stories. And my childhood provided me that, a very eclectic array of art all around me.
How big was the William Morris Agency at the time your father took that job in Paris? Was it kind of at the very beginning, or was it already really established?
Beginning. It was off the Champs-Élysées. I remember, white marble and fireplaces. And, it was quite, they represented all the big stars at the time. And he opened those very first offices. And then he went on, he stayed with them for quite a while. And then he went on and opened, his own office. And he spearheaded many other stars, Julio Iglesias, and, the Harlem Globetrotters and all the boxing, Muhammad Ali, Fraser Foreman. So he also was very eclectic in what he picked to promote.
Do you remember anything about the move? I mean, was the family excited about going to Paris? Were you excited?
Oh, well, yes, except, the little French kids were brutal and they tortured me. They called me La Petite Américaine, the little American, and they put frogs in my bag and pull my hair. But I found my way in. I started to write plays and put together evenings of poetry and dance. And I adapted this famous novel, The Queen's Necklace, Alexandre Dumas, which has been made into movies and TV shows. And I adapted that for the school and cast all the kids. And teachers loved me. And also I made them crazy because I revolutionized everything. But I was always putting something together, an event together. So I went from being, the little American girl that they would bully and torture to like the most popular girl in school because they all wanted me to cast them.
What was life like growing up around your dad? And I mean, specifically around show business. You were talking about some of the people your dad was working with back then. I mean, did anyone ever come around the house for dinner whom you look back on years later and went, wow, I had no idea just how unique or how special that was?
Oh, yes. We had a lot of very big celebrities come to dinner. There was Edith Piaf. Marlene Dietrich didn't come. Maurice Chevalier, a lot of like iconic people, Charles Aznavour, a lot of actors. And, they would go to the kitchen and gather whatever they could and make a big bowl of rice with whatever they could find in the refrigerator and in the kitchen. And there was a piano and they would play songs and laugh and tell stories. And so I was privy to those evenings, to those afternoons. It was actually sometimes entire days. So my dad was a wonderful, wonderful dad, as was my mom. They're both passed away, my mom very recently. I remember one morning when my dad was in Tokyo and he flew in especially to take me to school. So I see this big black car pulling in the driveway. We lived in this French castle. And he just literally came to take me for my first day of school. I think it was the 8th grade. And then he went right back on the plane to go close a deal in Tokyo. So this is the kind of stuff, even if, the fact that he traveled a lot when I was a child, but this is the memorable things that you remember. Every time he called, he remembered what test I had to take, what class I was, taking. My mom was more a mom at home. But it was my parents. What was wonderful about the upbringing that they gave me is that they didn't impose anything on me. They let me find my way. And I had a certain freedom. On one hand, maybe a child longs for a little bit more structure. But on the other hand, that freedom, I think, made me who I am today. And I found myself, they weren't necessarily the parents that took me to museums, although they took me to the Palais of Versailles many Sundays. Every time somebody would come to visit, we'd take them to the Palais de Versailles. But they, I went on my own. I had a freedom to go on my own and explore. And they didn't say no to me in the things that I wanted. So I had this very, free childhood.
And I presume you probably got to watch your dad go through some of the highs and lows of the industry. I know you've talked before about the image of him sitting on the edge of his bed, drinking a scotch, staring into space. I mean, it's kind of a cinematic image, actually. Was it kind of a foregone conclusion in your home that most of the kids would be artistic or work somehow in the business? Or did your parents ever voice a desire for you to do something different? Or, was that freedom, like you talked about earlier, to do whatever you wanted? Were you steered in a direction, steered away from something?
No, that it was, in a way, maybe I could have been guided more because I was very free to find my way. And find my way I did. Yes, there were a lot of ups and lows. I remember a limo, we were flying to Rome first class, a limo taking us to this beautiful vacation spot in Italy called Viareggio, where we had, waiters serve us lunch on the beach with white gloves, and they would bring the telephone because there were no cell phones at the time. They would bring the telephone to my dad on the beach. And then I remember, in New Jersey, there was a time where the electric bill wasn't paid. And my dad bounced a check at the market. So they were the highs and the lows for sure. But we had many highs. And yes, there were moments where my dad struggled. And he, yes, it's an image where he sat at the edge of the bed with a little scotch. He wasn't, a drinker. But, those were the tough moments. You knew when he sat there with the glass of scotch, he was having a hard time. And so there were big highs and big lows.
Did you get to watch lots of French cinema growing up? Did you have any favorite movies or actors or actresses from that time?
Very much so. Jean-Paul Belmondo and Alain Delon and Jean Gabin and Simone Signoret and Isabella Gianni. And the list goes on and on and on. Extraordinary actors and performers. And I would go to the movies all the time. And I would watch television all the time. I love French cinema. I love Italian cinema. There's so many great things to see. The power of story is something that always, found a place in my heart.
Was there maybe a specific film or play that kind of sealed the deal for you and made you go, this is what I want to do. I want to work in show business?
Well, I loved Antigone by Jean Anouilh. Antigone's story, that Greek tragedy, was very dominant, and Electra. So yeah, I worked a lot on that and the modern adaptation of that. And in terms of movies, I think I loved Gone with the Wind. That was a big movie that I loved. Yeah, that really, I remember going to see it to the movies, or Young Frankenstein. I loved that when I was a teenager. I was always had very eclectic tastes. You can't pin a taste because I always like to watch everything.
And now you really can watch like with streaming and everything, there's just so many things you can see of every genre at any moment at just a click,
Yeah, it's great. It's a huge library, a vast library of very diverse storytelling. And it makes the days, quite enjoyable, something to look forward to. I always check in with my kids and go, what are we watching tonight?
It's a great way at the end of the day, especially if you've had, a day where you're dealing with, frankly, any aggravation whatsoever, for you to unwind and, and just decompress. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
it's a fantastic art form for that. Now, if I'm correct, at some point you moved to New York to study acting under none other than such a luminary as Stella Adler. Did you know who she was before sitting under her teaching?
Absolutely. I knew she was an iconic teacher. And also Uta Hagen, and wonderful teachers that taught at HB Studios on Bank Street downtown. Mm-hmm. Steven Strumpel, Herbert Bergdorf himself. And there were some wonderful teachers at Stella Adler's school as well. Her, of course, her famous script interpretation class. Yes, I feel very privileged to have learned from these wonderful, wonderful teachers.
Now, what was it like kind of learning under her? I mean, did it feel like a legend or icon was speaking every time she sat to talk to you guys, or after a while, did you guys just go, oh, well, that's just her? You know what I mean? Did it ever become normal?
Yes, you never felt like you knew enough. So she inspired you to go learn more, which is exactly the point. I was a sponge wanting to learn. And I remember taking the subway at the time and doing scenes, Julia, the scene from the movie Julia, where I brought like a heavy coat and crutches and a box. And I think at some point everything fell out of my hands. And I thought, well, this is where you get to pay your dues. But I was very lucky to study with these teachers and be inspired, just be inspired to go out in the world and contribute something to the conversation.
Do you have maybe a favorite story of Stella, or from of your time there?
Well, I remember a distinct moment where we all, you applauded for her and we were not applauding hard enough or, passionately enough. And she said, no, this is not how you do it. This is how you do it. And she was teaching us, how to applaud and respect her.
I think one misconception people outside the industry have involves the idea of acting as a skill. I think a lot of people just imagine it as something innate, like apart from learning the line, there really isn't a lot to practice for it. But obviously that's not the case. I mean, there's obviously a lot of skills that are involved, in acting, right?
Absolutely. There's a craft to learn. And everybody thinks, oh, it's easy, I can do it. Well, yes, but there's a craft to learn. And you have to think of it also as a technician with a toolbox. Except I call it the golden box, which is what Sandy Meisner said. And every individual actor has the key to their unique toolbox, where they not only gather tools that help them to interpret a character, break down a script, but also lessons that they learn when they work on set, on stage, and also life lessons. All of that gold goes into that toolbox. And depending on what project you're working on, what character, you pick from there. Recently, as you said, I had the wonderful wonderful time working with Abigail Breslin, who is, ingrained in our pop culture as Little Miss Sunshine. And of course, she's worked, her whole life. I mean, she's worked, I'm sure, when she came out in diapers. No, I mean, she's like a born actress. It's in her DNA. So, and she played a difficult character in this last movie that I directed, Miranda's Victim. And to watch her go into her toolbox was really great. She never stopped impressing me.
Yeah, I find it kind of interesting that there are so many kind of different schools of, or should I say methods of acting. I mean, some might even say it's academic in the same way learning music is. And you were talking about and I was going to ask you about the golden box method and how you describe it. And I think you kind of very aptly did. Now, because of that, you've had some truly incredible stars come through your acting classes. I think Henry Cavill, Penelope Cruz, Gerard Butler, Isla Fisher, hundreds more. Obviously,
those actors were private coachings, yes.
Obviously, they're all incredibly talented, but I'm curious if there's anybody that comes to mind that you've either taught or coached that surprised you at just remarkably how insanely talented they are.
I feel very privileged to have worked with a group of incredibly talented actors. For instance, I did work with Chris Rock for a little while, and he is incredibly talented. I just saw his comedy special. He's just, excellent. I worked with a lot of wonderful people, and yes, I'm always blown away, not only by their talent, but by something that Stella Adler said that I recognize in many, which is a talent for the talent, which means that not only do you have to have talent, because a lot of people do, but you have to have the desire of the work ethic to nurture the talent. And I think that that's very important.
And I think one of the things I've found is that there is a different aura, like a different essence around people who have that talent. In the things that I've worked on, there have been some people who just they just walk into a room and it just the presence they just command. It's just there. It just oozes out of them almost. It's crazy.
Absolutely, it's an energy. It's a desire to share something. It's a desire to be alive. It's a desire to feel yourself emotionally. It's a combination of many things.
Are there any of the people who you've worked with who are particularly known for one genre who you think would actually be incredible in a totally different genre? I think at heart, every actor wants to stretch. They want to have range. So if an actor is really good with comedy, like, for instance, Adam Sandler, he challenged himself, and I like him very much in all the more serious roles, or Jim Carrey. Every actor longs to challenge themselves, raise the bar, to, stretch, as I said. I think Robin Williams is probably a fantastic example of that.
Great example, yes.
I know you speak more than one language. Does being bilingual or multilingual have any benefit as an actor apart from the obvious ability to speak different languages? I mean, to me, it seems like people who are bilingual process and think things through maybe differently than somebody who isn't.
Well, you can, as I've coached different people, different actors from all over the world, and have traveled internationally with my class, my master class, the Golden Box. I extensively went to Mexico several times, and South America, Lima. I went to, where did I go? I went to Panama. I went to Guatemala. I went Colombia several times, I think 3 times. It's great to be able to teach in Spanish. I've gone to Paris several times. It's great to teach in French. It's great to teach in Italian and Portuguese. It's great, you reach more people. I think as a filmmaker, you want to reach the biggest classroom in the world. And as a teacher, as an acting teacher, you want to do the same. And you want to inspire a young generation, the next generation, to be, the most incredible artists that they can be, to reach their potential, to fulfill their destiny. And that's what the mandate is. That's what the mission is. So, it's been great to speak those languages, absolutely, and to be able to teach in all those languages, yes.
So you've had this wonderful career teaching and working across show business. So what was the key moment? At what point do you go, okay, you know what, I'm going to start looking for directorial work now? When did that shift happen for you?
Yes, when I worked on a couple of features, a couple of independent movies as an actor, I always say that if you're directing stage, you can, it's the actor's medium. So the director can, at, the last rehearsal before you're about to open, you say, here, the play's yours, take it. It's your play. And so theater is not necessarily at that point a director's medium, it's an actor's medium. But when it comes to directing film, the director is the one that gets to sign the painting, pick the size of the canvas, the colors, the textures, how it's going to be interpreted. And so the actor, when it's a wrap on set, it's the actor that can go have postpartum depression because then it's, the director gets to sign it. And so I realized, oh, well, I would like to be the one to sign it. I want to be the one to tell the story. And so that's what drew me to want to direct. It's storytelling. Very, very excited. So I am, I keep being inspired, and I keep, I just signed on to direct a big feature film. I feel that you have to put yourself as an artist always in a place that doesn't quite feel comfortable. It's not comfortable, but that's how you grow. And I like to challenge myself. And I'm happy that at this point in my life, I am able to keep doing things that are more and more difficult. And because I am the mother of 2 kids, I'm happy to show them that, because I think ultimately it's what it's about. You have to live life in a place that feels that, you do things that scare you and you do them anyway. Obviously not putting yourself, at risk. I always showed my kids early on the movie Whiplash. And I said, you have to bleed, but metaphorically.
Well, anybody can play it safe.
Yes. And it's important to be unsafe. Yeah. That's right.
Your directorial debut came with How to Go Out on a Date in Queens with Jason Alexander. How did that particular opportunity come about?
So I had done these plays on stage, and I thought, it would be great to see if we could have them intersect. There's never been a movie called How to Go Out on a Date in Queens. I thought it was fun. It was really my equivalent of going to film school. I didn't go to film school. So that was my equivalent. That's how I learned. And I asked these wonderful actors, Ron Perlman and Jason Alexander and Isai Morales and Rob Estes and Alison Eastwood and Kimberly Paisley to be in it. They said yes, and just played and had fun. It was just a little fun movie. My equivalent of going to film school.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. And a special thanks to director Michelle Danner for joining us. She's going to be back with us again next week to finish our review. So please tune back in. Stay safe, everyone.